When DICE announced Battlefield 5, they promised a lot of big changes. Some of these changes were just returns to the classic Battlefield way of doing things, for example, old Conquest, as well as a return to a recoil-based ballistic system, but they also promised a lot of new features to deepen and improve the gameplay. Like, for example, more complex infantry animations, an attrition system which limits your ammo, and even a fortification system. I want to get on the list of DICE's biggest changes here in Battlefield 5 and see how they actually played out in the closed alpha. First things first, let's talk ballistics and gunplay. To really appreciate the changes that DICE has made here in Battlefield 5, let's look back briefly at Battlefield 1 with its more random deviation weapons ballistics. The randomness that was added to the weapons in Battlefield 1 does level the playing field, if a bit artificially. It's easier on new players because there's always going to be a random element to keep veteran players in check. No matter how much a veteran player practices with his favorite weapon, they're never going to be able to dial it in to react exactly the same every time, and they won't be becoming gods with them. Even though Battlefield 1 has my favorite theme in any Battlefield title, it definitely has some of the weakest gameplay. In Battlefield 5, even in the closed alpha, the gunplay is far superior to Battlefield 1, which again, I still enjoy. It is very, very promising. I'd say even just this side of incredible. It's exciting to see the return of skill-based, recoil-based ballistics in the weapons in Battlefield 5. I was a bit concerned that the weapons would perhaps feel a little bit samey if they all were tap-fired because that was the way to land hits, but to my surprise, every weapon in the alpha, and yes, it was a limited selection, but every weapon in the alpha performed differently, felt distinct, and was actually fun to use. I put time into every gun in that alpha and had fun with all of them. A few of my biggest surprises were actually the light machine guns and the medium machine guns. The light machine gun being incredibly satisfying once you got a handle on its recoil pattern, and the medium machine gun being a lot of fun because you had to deploy that bipod and create a lane of fire to be effective. I had a whole video that I put up on that first actually for the alpha because I found it so unique and so much fun. The gunplay in Battlefield 5 harkens back to a bit more of the Battlefield 4 style, perhaps even the Battlefield 3 style, and the overall infantry combat is very, very satisfying. The only thing that I missed really from Battlefield 1 were my bolt-action iron-sighted rifles, and there just weren't any in this alpha. I really hope DICE brings those back because those iron sights and those bolt actions with these new ballistics would be an absolute blast, I think. To go along with the new weapon ballistics, there's also a new player controller. This is the overall system that controls how your player moves and reacts with the environment. Just an overall name for it, if you will. This was shown off in the trailer by showing some of the multiplayer characters being blown backwards by an explosion and then recovering to continue the fight. I worried that this was going to be a marketing gimmick, kind of on the level of Levolution from Battlefield 4. Something cool for trailers, but not really that great for actual gameplay, and just a gimmick. To my surprise though, the Infantry Movement system and player controller in Battlefield 5 is mostly just behind the scenes and works surprisingly well just by itself. And multiple times I would turn a corner, see enemies, fall back while trying to shoot, and then go prone, and my character would actually fall back onto his back, crawl backwards on his backside while aiming forward. It all felt pretty intuitive and dynamic and pretty good. You can also see the new player controller with a lot of other player actions all around you. I saw players who were climbing through windows and crawling around using a few of the different animations. And to my surprise, even here in Alpha, everything seemed to be synced up really well. There wasn't a whole lot of animation wonkiness going on, which is very important when you have all of these additional animation states, where you do have so many more things that a player's character could be doing. You don't want that to get in the way of gameplay. It was awesome to see it all working so smoothly, even here in Alpha. And I heard that even the ragdolls in the game are server synchronized so that everyone sees the same ragdolls at the same time now. Solid improvements to the Frostbite animation system. There was one issue with the player animations that I noticed, and that's that a problem that was fixed in Battlefield 1 has returned here in the Alpha of Battlefield 5, and that is AD-AD spam. Which means on PC, with your more linear WASD movement controls, players in Battlefield 5 are once again able to spam the strafe buttons AD, left and right rapidly to make their player character jitter obnoxiously and make them very difficult to hit. You guys might have noticed in the background footage that I'm starting to do the same thing, the AD jitter, as a reaction to other people doing it to me, just without even thinking about it. This was a balance problem that was fixed in Battlefield 1, and hopefully it will be fixed soon in Battlefield 5 as well. DICE also seemed to be quite proud of their attrition system when they announced the game. That's the idea that you only spawn with a few magazines of ammo and have to either resupply from a support player or from a ammo stash on the map, and as I expected, I loved this feature in the alpha. I wanted the gameplay to slow down, and while I think it's still a little bit too fast, I think that things could be tweaked to slow it down further. It was really cool to actually run dry on ammo occasionally in a firefight. There were a lot of supply stashes on the map, probably I would say 12 to 14 easily, so ammo wasn't a problem as long as you thought about it. Smart players are not only going to avoid multiple sequential head-to-head engagements, but they're also going to bounce off of those ammo stashes as often as possible. This is just a small change, but in the alpha, I was liking the slight shift it was adding to the gameplay. The attrition system also applies to tanks. They, like airplanes, no longer have unlimited ammo. They also have to resupply at those same ammo caches. You've got to roll up and hold X to resupply if you go through all of your tank shells. Most of the tanks that I saw in the alpha could carry about 18 shells by default. This should help cut down on tank camping, as you'll have to move to a resupply point to actually get more ammo, although in the alpha there was at least one point on the map that had an overlook spot for a tank to just sit and camp right next to a resupply box, which kind of defeats the purpose. That's really just a balance change that needs to be made for that map though. Overall, requiring tanks to fall back for ammo is a great idea, and it harkens back to the pre-Frostbite engine Battlefield days. This new attrition system does help to slightly slow down the infantry gameplay and cut out a little bit of that Conquest mode circling where one team just circles the other across the map over and over again, just capturing points in a row. Because there's less charging forward after every firefight, you gotta duck off to the side and resupply occasionally. This is also helped by not a new feature, but the return of an old feature. Old Conquest is back, and that's where I spent most of my time here in the closed alpha. Once again, your team's score is actually a pool of respawn tickets, and the more flags that you own, the faster that you're burning away at your enemy's resupply ticket pool. This means that even if your team is quite far behind, if you push hard enough, you can freeze their score, their ability to drain your tickets, and you can do the same to them and bleed their tickets faster and come back from the brink for a win. In fact, I saw so many more close games here in the alpha than I ever did in Battlefield 1's Conquest system, which was always one of my biggest complaints with Battlefield 1. They didn't have to mess with Conquest. It wasn't confusing, and the old Conquest system always is going to allow for better comebacks, better games, and closer matches. So happy to see old Conquest back. It was a blast. That leaves just a few mechanics that I want to cover. The next one's going to be fortifications. This is a mechanic that I was very skeptical of when they announced it at the Battlefield 5 livestream. I also barely saw it being used at the EA Play build in operations mode because the operation tended to move so quickly. You had a lot of fortifications in the first points, that would drop off very fast because the game just moved way too fast as it went from point to point. In Conquest mode in the closed alpha though, I saw a ton of fortification usage, and I used it myself after my squad would take a point to build some quick sandbags for my team's machine gunners. I also found myself trapped with, well, tank traps while in a tank multiple times because infantry had gone in and blocked off part of the town with those tank traps thanks to the fortification system. I just overall saw it being used a ton more here in the closed alpha than I ever did at EA Play, and it almost always was a addition to the gameplay and not an annoyance. This is not Fortnite. Yes, there are outlines for building the different fortifications, but that's just how most building systems work in games. It is not effective to try and build these fortifications while you're taking fire. You're going to die. The time to kill is way too fast, and building fortifications is actually quite slow. It is a very strategic decision to stop and build those fortifications. It's something you're going to do in your downtime, not during a fight. The final mechanic that I want to cover is the airplane resupply system. There's an obvious problem with the more simplified aircraft in Battlefield 1. They can just farm infantry. They have unlimited ammo, relatively fast cooldown, and even though the AA packs a nasty punch, good pilots can just wreak havoc on the ground, all by themselves. I think the main problem here isn't skill-based flying, or the fact that planes with practice can do very well against ground targets, but that unlimited ammo was just too much. Here in Battlefield 5, airplanes have to resupply from an aerial resupply point. And yes, right now, it's a ridiculous looking floating token in the sky, kind of like Battlefront. We've been told that that is a placeholder that is temporary, and there will be some other resupply system. I believe it was something like a resupply balloon, perhaps, something a little bit more lore friendly than a token. Again, that's just what I've heard, just hearsay for now. Just know that the tokens are most likely, very likely placeholder. Anyway, this system though, the system of requiring airplanes to resupply is a good one on paper, I think. Forcing aircraft to go back for more ammunition is one way to balance their weapons, so that you don't have to nerf their damage output where planes are frustrating to fly, but by forcing them to not constantly be in the engagement area, it's also not going to be as frustrating for ground players. There will be moments where the skies actually are briefly clear of airplanes as they go back for ammo. The problem, I think, with how they're set up right now is they don't give you enough ammo for that journey back and forth from the resupply point. It does take you quite far out of the battle, as it should, but for example on the bombers, you would only get one bombing run worth of bombs per resupply run. That's too low, I think. This, I think, is an easy balance fix. Simply allow the resupply token to give you 2 bomb loads and make that journey back to the base actually worth it. So guys, here's a summary of all of the mechanical changes here in Battlefield 5. At the end of the alpha, I found myself with over 20 hours in just, I think, 4 days played. As much as I loved the theme of Battlefield 1, it's been hard to go back to the more simplified mechanics in that game compared to, again, how deep things were in Battlefield 5. So guys, if you also got to try the closed alpha, what did you think, and are you excited for the launch of the game? How do you guys think Battlefield 5's gameplay is going to stack up both against the other Battlefield Frostbite titles and the more classic Battlefield games as well? Additionally guys, I'm giving away a PC copy of Battlefield 1 right here. You don't have to do anything to enter other than hit the entry link below so I can make sure that your entry is logged. You're welcome to subscribe to the channel if you want to, but it is not required. All you have to do is hit that link to enter. Big thanks to EA for providing a copy of the game to give away. For now, hope you guys enjoyed, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.